Okay, for part two, let's start off just talking a little bit about the captivity narrative and its genre, or the captivity narrative genre, I should say, and its appeal. This is not exactly the first captivity narrative, but it became a fairly popular kind of thing for people to read about. Not necessarily in the colonies, but certainly back home in England, where, reports of these exotic people and these exotic lands and animals and things and danger and all of that kind of thing was just a real page turner for those folks. So they had a lot of appeal. And of course, some of the earlier captivity narratives that were done regarding white settlers and Native Americans and that kind of conflict actually kind of gets translated over, believe it or not, into slave narratives, slave captivity narratives. Harriet Jacobs, Frederick Douglass, other folks like that who write about their desire to escape the captivity of slavery. So these genres would start out one way and have quite a history and quite a tradition, and they kind of get merged over into a different set of circumstances based on the historical times. But it had quite a wide appeal. Again, like I said in the first video, this trek into the wilderness and all these different removes as she goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the dark wilderness reflect, I think, a psychological journey for her. And you certainly see that in her writings. Now, obviously she didn't take a minute by minute account of this. This is stuff that she has to recollect later, but that's important in the piece too. I almost want to call it a novel because it's such a compelling narrative, but it's not a novel. Part of the reason she's writing it, I think, especially towards the end, is to come to terms with what the meaning of this experience was for her. As a religious woman of Puritan persuasion, again, why did God let me go through this? Okay. So it's her journey. Let's take it from her perspective for a moment. Critics love to use the text as a vehicle to illustrate European atrocities and stereotyping. Yeah. I mean, the European settlers that were living there, I think, had very little understanding, certainly not appreciation, for the different cultures and values of the people who were already there. There's no question about it. And the brutality was tremendous. But the brutality was on both sides. And I think the misunderstanding was on the other side as well. I'm not trying to be, to commit the fallacy of equating two different moral sets of circumstances, but it's a complex situation. Okay. There's no question that what you saw, that what in her text undoubtedly happened. I mean, there was brutality. I mean, serious brutality, infanticide, the murdering of pregnant women. All of this was shocking, of course, to Europeans. She's kind of entering a different sort of universe with different values and cultural norms, almost, in her mind, almost, but not quite, beyond God's reach. Okay. The Puritans would have seen Native Americans as being almost akin to devil worshippers, as almost demonic. They demonize them quite literally. And then the use of scripture throughout the text as well to help structure the narrative. She gets a hold of a Bible, and this is extremely precious to her because it's the lifeline that she needs to stay afloat spiritually and psychologically as well. So I'm going to go through just a couple of passages, and I want you to kind of notice the themes that emerge here. The alienation theme is one of them. There's a reversal of otherness. And the reason I say that is because as a European settler living there, she would have seen them, right, the Native Americans who kidnapped her, as being the different ones. But suddenly when she's plucked out of that and brought into the wilderness with them, she's the strange one. She's the odd one. She's the one that is completely out of place. She's the one that doesn't share their values or norms. And the question is, she's the cultural outcast in a way, the alien. There's no way for her to navigate this world. Her moral values seem almost incapable of equipping her to deal with the experiences she's dealing with. And so she's got to work her way through that. So a couple of things, if you'll bear with me here. I've got my text in front of me. She exhibits in a number of ways a survival instinct that you would expect to be something that would be standard for all human beings, right? So across cultures. Yeah, okay. She'll do whatever it takes. Do you recall the scene, for example, where a baby is incapable of eating some meat or gnawing the meat off of a bone because it has no teeth? And she readily goes ahead and takes it and eats it to survive. Food is a huge thing in this. The starvation, the hand-to-mouth existence. I mean, there's no question many of these people starved, and she certainly was in jeopardy of starving to death very frequently. Many of the others in the tale starved to death. But that very idea that I will go ahead and eat this, even though this child, I'm taking it from the child. Well, under normal circumstances, back in her own town or village, no one would have thought of or dreamed of doing that. But the practicality and the necessity of the circumstances compel her to do it. She's able to rationalize it in her head because the child wasn't going to be able to eat it anyway, right? The child wouldn't be able to eat it anyway. So you might as well go ahead and eat it. That baby can't. So there's nothing that can be done about it. And yet, if you and I were in the same circumstances in our own home, town, village, whatever, we would still have reservations about taking it. And we would say, oh, I can't eat. I mean, when I know that this child is starving, I can't eat. I can't eat anything knowing a child is starving right in front of me. And yet, the necessity of the circumstances compelled her to do it and not think twice about it, apparently. That is one step removed from the question which does not pose itself in here of what if you had to resort to eating human flesh to live, right? That's not for this particular tale, but it certainly raises very dark questions. A European audience would have been shocked by it, and yet she offers a rationale for it that I think is at least morally acceptable to Western European norms, and that is to say, it wouldn't have saved the child anyway. But the degree to which she kind of accepts that without any emotional descriptors attached to it is rather stark. I mean, that, and it certainly, and that's the other thing that's kind of interesting about this. This is not a text that has, wails, and it's not overly emotional or anything like that. That really would have been something that you would see in the 19th century, not in the 17th century, to be honest with you, where melodrama was, dominated a lot of narratives. So the amount of sort of emotional reserve in this, the stoicism, also actually kind of makes it even more chilling. Right? Sometimes when people tell you a story without emotion, it's actually much more moving than if they had gone over the top and been very emotional about it. Because certainly with this text, there's not a lot of emotionalism. She just states facts. And because they just kind of drop in your lap without commentary, you're required to sort of shockingly take it in and try to process that. It's quite interesting the way she does it and the way she crafts it. So she only has one wounded child left after the attack. Now she has a son and a daughter, but other people in the initial battle or raid on her farm and village die like crazy, and they go into this trek into the wilderness, and she's consistently asking for a sign. She's always asking about, God, please show me something, and she's disheartened by not receiving what she's asking for frequently. She does go and see her son. She runs into her son, so there's reason for optimism occasionally there. She receives a Bible. She uses the scripture. It's extremely valuable to her, as we said. She is actually a very valuable asset for a couple of different reasons to those who possess her, right? One is she's a terrific seamstress. And that is a skill that would have been highly prized. And so as she's being transitioned from one captor to another, don't think that her value as a seamstress, as a skilled seamstress, isn't important, because it's very, very important. And it probably keeps her alive in many respects. I mean, why would you starve the person who has a talent or a skill like that? But they sure come close to it. Of course, the disregard with which she's treated, the callousness with which she's treated, the inhumanity, she's telling it from the perspective of a European settler. Okay. Was there callousness and inhumanity? Oh, absolutely. Was there violence and brutality? Sure. What she's not telling you is what happened on the other side as well towards Native Americans. Be your own judge. Okay. But I'm not looking for false equivalency here. I'm just trying to place it into perspective, because I don't think there's any question that what happened to her that what she describes in here actually happens to her. But there comes a point where she reaches a sort of spiritual crisis, and I believe it's in this 13th remove. In our text, it's on page 20. My eyes will work on page 29, the bottom of page 29, where she gives this kind of Job-like reflection. If you're familiar with the book of Job at all in the Old Testament, Job is everything is taken from him because the devil says to God, notice your servant Job there. The only reason he's faithful to you is because you gave him a lot of stuff. Take away all his stuff, put him through all kinds of misery, and he won't be faithful to you at all. Well, of course, Job goes through all the loss of everything and the suffering, but he does stay faithful to God. Okay, but that everybody says the patience of Job, right? Because that's to pay the patience to endure. Here's what she says here. She says, "Yet I can say that in all my sorrows and afflictions, God did not leave me to have my impatience work towards himself, as if his ways were unrighteous." In other words, not one point did I question or lose my patience with God and lose faith that ultimately he would see me through this. He says, she says, or that what was happening to me was unrighteous, was wrong, that God was letting evil happen to me and didn't care, right? Evil was happening to me, but it's not as though God didn't care. I didn't give up on God caring about me, and is what she's saying. But I knew that he laid upon me less than I deserved, right? Ugh. Well, she's like, I'm a sinful creature. Not necessarily that what I did in my past life. I mean, I can't imagine was she's like a bank robber, a murderer, child molester, or something like that. Because first thing in my mind would be like, boy, I don't know. Do I deserve this? This is horrible. But as a good, devout Puritan, she would say, look, I deserve this and more for my sin. Sin is an abomination to God, and whatever he doles out to me, I got it coming because I'm a sinful creature. Anything that I don't receive in the way of punishment is a blessing and a mercy from God because I sure deserve it. You and I might think, well, you're beating yourself up here, lady, a little bit, but this is the way she believed. Afterward, after this doleful time ended with me, I was turning the leaves of my Bible, and the Lord brought to me some scriptures which did a little revive me, as that of Isaiah 55:8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. Right. So she uses that as kind of a justification to say, look, in our human understanding doesn't process why this terrible thing is happening to me, but God knows. Now, you might look at it and say, this is not right, this is not fair, God's being unfair to me, he's allowing me to suffer, but that's only because our human reasoning and our human understanding cannot comprehend God's larger morality, God's larger vision for our lives. So she consoles herself in that way, and I got to tell you something, I think a person without that kind of very strong rooting in either religious faith or at least a very strong rooting in some sort of a philosophy would not have made it through what she was going through. And of course, there's no telling what kind of psychological scars she had afterwards anyway. But certainly, and again, food, the constant food, is something that keeps coming up. Now, at one point they say, now let's ransom her, see if we can't get some money for this lady, right? And she does eventually get ransomed. This is a tricky situation because if you say, oh, no one will pay you anything for me, well, then they're going to just abuse the living daylights out of her. They don't see her as that valuable. But if you say, no, I'm very valuable, and they would pay a big ransom for me, then that's problematic because can your family raise that? And even if they do raise it, are they going to sort of bilk them for even more money and more money and more? There's a problem with kidnapping all the time, right? So she says here on the bottom of page 37, they bid me speak what I thought he would give, my husband, how much money he would give. Now knowing that all we had was destroyed by the Indians, see, they don't have any money now. I was in great strait. I thought I should speak of but a little, right? Just tell him only a little amount. It would be slighted that if she told him it was a small amount, then and hinder the matter. If of a great sum, if I told him that no, he'd give a lot of money, I knew not what would be provided, procured. Yet at venture I said 20 pounds. They desired them to take less, yet desired them to take less, but they would not hear of it. Now look, you're like, wait a minute, why do these Indians want money, right? Listen, they traded in all kinds of things. They traded in goods, they traded in animals, they traded in all kinds of things. It's not as though Native Americans by 1666 or 1675, didn't understand the value of the British pound. They did. They're not stupid. They understand that. You say, they're going to take actual money? Yeah. No, they're going to probably want it in gold and silver, not paper money. They didn't have a lot of paper money then. But they understood what gold and silver was worth, and they could use it all over the place. Same thing with jewelry or any other valuables. So they were not stupid. They were shrewd. So another battle takes place, and eventually she is rescued. But at the end of all of this, I want you to pay particular attention to the bottom of page 42 and all through page 43, because this is the point at which, after all the trauma that exists, she has to sort of recap things and ask in her own mind, why did this happen? Why did it happen to me? Why did this happen to our settlement, our colony? What is the takeaway from this? And I halfway think that the reason she wrote it wasn't just to publish it in England and as a curiosity for people abroad. I'm sure she probably didn't make any money off of it much, not much, but and certainly not for the notoriety for it. But in a way, the way a lot of people write about things after their trauma, and that is to try to work through it and figure out why it happened. As a sort of self-exploration. So she went on a psychological journey in the deep, dark woods, and another sort of psychological journey, maybe its antithesis, in the writing of this text. So you can see those as kind of bookmarks, if you will. It's kind of a deep idea, but I think there's something to it, I think, to make out that. So she says here, and this is really important, you should read between the lines here. Remember with Bradstreet we said, it's easy to say, well, now women weren't involved in things like this, and they didn't get involved in politics and all that kind of nonsense, and so they're not politically savvy or philosophically savvy. Don't you sell them short. Even Puritan women who you think have this idea that, they're like practically Amish. They're so oppressed. Nope. Even these Puritan women thought for themselves and did for themselves. Watch very carefully here. She actually has a very subtle critique of the leadership of these Puritan settlers, right? The government and military people who bungled, in her mind, both getting them into the war and how they handled the war, and certainly the rescue of hostages. She has some choice things to say if you are careful and read between the lines. Now watch carefully here on page 42, if I can manage enough space here. But before I go any further, I would leave to mention a few remarkable passages of providence. Okay, Puritan, believes in providence. All right, tell me, Mary, where did you see providence at work here? She says, 1, of the fair opportunity lost in the long march a little after the fort fight, when our English army was so numerous and in pursuit of the enemy, and so near as to overtake several and destroy them, and the enemy in such distress for food that our men might track them by their rooting in the earth for ground nuts, whilst they were flying for their lives. I say that then our army should want provision and be forced to leave their pursuit and return home afterwards. In other words, we had them on the run. They were desperate. But our army, for whatever reason, ran out of food, ran out of supplies, turned around, went back home, and that's why this whole kidnapping took. Now, why does she say that's providence? She says, well, God wanted to teach us a lesson and wanted us to suffer. And look at what he did. When we should have been able to knock these guys out early on, God's providence was that we didn't bring enough equipment and ammo and food and water to continue the pursuit. All right, either that's God's providence, or another way of saying it is, isn't it interesting how God made us so stupid and incompetent in carrying out this rescue that people like me were allowed to suffer? For God's will, yeah. But don't you think there's not a critique in there about, now, how much can a Puritan woman critique the military and political authorities of her day? Not a lot. But you and I might say, well, okay, yes, it was providence, but at the same time, remember that free will thing? What she's really saying also, I think, is how incredibly stupid our leaders were to not prepare for an event like this. They didn't prepare. They didn't do anywhere near enough to protect us. All right, take a look further here. She says, but what shall I say? God seemed to leave his people to themselves and order all things for his own holy ends. So she's not saying God's to blame. She's saying that, notice how God used the absolute stupid, incompetent, moronic leadership we had to allow us to suffer because we had it coming. Well, okay, some of that's God, certainly, that's God's providence, but let's don't overlook the stupid, incompetent, moronic leadership, which is her way of, giving them the backhand and saying, you people were stupid. Number 2, I cannot but remember how the Indians derided the slowness and dullness of the English army in its setting out. She says, I was there with them. They had me kidnapped. They kept saying, where are your guys? You guys aren't even chasing us. They're not even coming. They're a bunch of clueless, bumbling idiots, right? Okay, so yeah, is that providence? Yeah, God used their stupid, slow dullness to allow this tragedy to continue and for me to stay in captivity for all that length and to deal with all this abuse. But let's not overlook the fact that you people were stupid, slow, and dull in your pursuit. You didn't know what you were doing. You people don't know your you-know-what from your elbow, if you want to put it in graphic terms. My apologies. For after the desolations at Lancaster and Medfield, as I went along with them, they asked me when I thought the English army would come after them. I told them I could not tell. It may be they may come in May, said they. Thus did they scoff at us, as if the English would be a quarter of a year getting ready. That is clearly a subtle, not so subtle, criticism that our leadership was stupid, they didn't make good decisions, they weren't prepared, and they didn't even come after us the way they should have. 3, which also I have hinted before, when the English army with new supplies were sent forth to pursue after the enemy till they came to Bacquang Creek, where they forthwith went over safely, that the river should be impassable to the English. But in other words, it was providential that the English couldn't get over the river. All right, well, let's take a look at why. I can but admire to see the wonderful providence of God in preserving the heathens for further affliction to our poorer country. So they get to the river while they were trying to pursue us, and they can't get across, but the Indians do. Why is that? Well, here's why. Because they were equipped improperly. They weren't trained properly to cross a river. They're carrying heavy armor. That's not what you fight with in the wilderness. Even Mary Rowlandson says, well, it was God's providence, I guess, to make us really dumb. But that doesn't excuse you, leader, from being dumb. You've been living in this place for 50 years since the Pilgrims first settled here, and you don't know that it's a dumb idea to bring heavy armor into the wilderness and to try to cross a river in it? Yeah, no wonder you had to turn back, because you're not properly equipped. You're not properly prepared. You don't have the tactics. You haven't thought this through. 4, it was thought if their corn were cut down, they would starve and die with hunger. So the English, right? The English settlers systematically destroy their food supply. All right, well, there's an atrocity there. Do you do that in war? Well, I guess you do, but it's pretty awful, right? They thought, we'll starve them. And all their corn that could be found was destroyed. And they, driven with that little they had in store, into the woods in the midst of winter. And yet how to admiration did the Lord preserve them for his holy ends, and the destruction of many still amongst the English. Strangely did the Lord provide for them, that I did not see all the time I was among them, one man or woman or child die with hunger. Guess what? You can destroy their corn, but they're used to living on their wits, and they can get by eating stuff out in the woods. And the English thought, oh, we'll just starve them out. You know what? They're not farmers. I mean, they're farmers and hunter-gatherers, but if you take away their farming, they can still live. Not you. You live on farming or you die. You don't live in the wilderness. You're not trained to do it. They are. So that was a stupid strategy too. So what I'm getting at here is she frames her criticism of the English authorities in a way that basically, pardon me, I got a technical thing here. Sorry. Excuse me, I'm sorry about this. Something's popping up on me. She frames her criticism of the English authorities in a way that's basically just saying, well, now Providence made you that stupid. Providence made you that incompetent. Providence made that really boneheaded error. Providence made you that cowardly. It's not that Providence made them, but that Providence allowed all those bad leadership traits to manifest themselves at once as though to teach them a lesson. So Rowlandson can't directly comment on politics, but boy, she does it indirectly, and she really puts forth a damning indictment of the people who were in charge of her side. You can almost see deep down inside, she's still very upset and angry at the stupidity of the people who should have been better prepared and should have done a better job here. Now she chalks it up to, well, yeah, they were dumb, but God used their dumbness to teach us a valuable lesson. But there's no excusing their dumb, okay? So it is a critique of the dominant power structure here, and it does indicate a real serious... now, there's one final thing I want to raise here, and then we'll move on to Wheatley real quickly. Wheatley's a very short poem. We can handle that fairly fast. And that is, there's a question mark that's probably hanging over the heads of just about all readers. Back on page 45, right in the middle of the page, she says, "Yet not one of them ever offered the least abuse of unchastity to me, in word or action." What does that mean? I was never sexually assaulted. I was never sexually abused, either physically or verbally or psychologically. Why does she feel she needs to do that? Well, because of course, that's naturally one of the things that people are wondering. Oh, I wonder if something terrible happened to her. I wonder if they sexually abused her, etc. They're going to think that. Lots of people are thinking that when these kinds of things happen, because they're thinking, oh, these savage people, you know how they are. Now, that happens with almost everybody, in circumstances of war. That happens all the time, and it kind of doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing on. There's always some bad people who do bad things like that, right? More so with some situations, less so with others. So it's kind of a normal thing to wonder, hey, I wonder if that happened to her. I don't know. And she says, though some are ready to say, I speak it for my own credit, but I speak it in the presence of God and to his glory. I was not sexually assaulted or molested or harassed at all in any way, shape, or form. Why does she say you're only saying that, because you don't want to be, embarrassed or ashamed? That's what she's saying, which tells you the state of people's minds when it comes to that kind of thing. The victim blaming, even back then, probably more so even than now, but it's still there today. It's like, I don't want to say, you don't want to say that you were raped because you don't want to deal with the shame and the humiliation of it. And she says, no, I'm telling you the truth. God's my witness. They didn't do that. Now, and also the reader wants to think they would, because they're the bad guys. So, of course, they would try to do that. And she's like, no, I'm trying to be truthful with you. And you're only saying that because you don't want to deal with the shame and humiliation of sexual assault, which is really awful that anybody would give people those feelings, having gone through that as a victim, not a perpetrator. But that was what was the case was, okay? The final passage there on page 49 that I want to highlight. I have seen the extreme vanity of this world. 1 hour I have been in health and wealth, wanting nothing, but the next hour in sickness and wounds and death, having nothing but sorrow and affliction. And so this text is a way for her to work out, why did that happen to me? Who's at fault? What does this mean for my life? What does that mean for us as a people? It's a deep and profound text, I think, more profound than people think. They just think it's kind of an action thing that tells you about what happened, but there's a deep sense of reflection, spiritual, psychological reflection in the text, and I think you can appreciate it even if you're not of her faith. You can still appreciate what she's going through there. Okay. Now let's talk very briefly about Phyllis Wheatley, and this is a poem that gives a lot of people a lot of pause, and I understand why. Some people look at this poem and they say, right, speaking of psychological things, why would a young woman who was enslaved in 18th century America say a thing like she says in this poem, which almost seems to indicate that she's glad she was enslaved? I think that's actually kind of a misreading, but it can certainly come off that way, right? That's surely not the case. That should be surely not the case. So what is she really saying? But some people do, and they look at it and they say, oh, look, she's happy that she was a slave, right? Like all of us would love to be that, right? But she says, "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught me my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too." Okay. Again, some people would say, well, look at that. That she's very happy to have been a slave. Really. Whose mercy? God's mercy. So I want to kind of pair this up with Bradstreet and with Rowlandson. You see, I'm kind of developing a theme here, that the circumstances are bad. but the end result from God, according to Wheatley, according to Rowlandson, according to Bradstreet, can be made to be good. Not whole, but good. Does Bradstreet get her house back? No. Does Rowlandson have all of the memory of this trauma and the violence erased from her? No. PTSD for life. Is Wheatley enduring slavery even though, in her view, she has an opportunity for eternal salvation because she's been exposed to Christianity? Right? Yes. Right? But does she want to be enslaved? No. Who would want to be? If you asked her, would you like to be a slave and a Christian? She would say, well, I mean, if that's all I have, yes. But I'd kind of like to be free and a Christian too, if you give me the choice, right? So in each case, these women are looking to sort of divine providence, divine intervention, divine plan to say, no matter what the suffering. No, Bradstreet never says, hey, it's great to lose your house. Rowlandson never says, hey, it's great to be, taken away in the wilderness and just, abused psychologically. And Wheatley's not saying here, it's great to be a slave. She's saying that 'twas mercy brought me from my pagan land. What does that mean? It means that in the greater spiritual sense, mercy brought me out of a condition that was ignorant of Christianity, of Christ, of God, from a pagan land to here. That is that part of the whole episode of my life of being brought into captivity from freedom in Africa because she was taken as a little girl. That is a blessing. The blessing that I was exposed to that. 'Twas mercy in that regard on a spiritual level, but not on a physical or temporal level, okay? Taught my benighted soul to understand. So here's the really interesting thing. All three of these women are dealing with something that, how does one find something redeeming in a terrible set of circumstances? That's very interesting, right? So they're all three tied together that way. But look at the last couple of lines of Wheatley's poem, where she says, some view our sable means dark or black, race with scornful eye, right? Some people don't like people of dark skin, right? She's talking about Europeans for the most part, or European Americans. Their color is a diabolic dye, right? Oh, they're dark because they're the devil, okay? Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain. Remember the story of Cain and Abel, right? Cain was given a mark after he killed Abel, right? And sent out into the wilderness and was shunned. Go back and read Genesis. It's the earlier chapters of it, okay? But Cain kills his brother Abel. It's the first murder recorded in the Bible, and he is given a mark. Now, we're not told what mark he was given, right? But everybody knew that's Cain, right? Because you can see his mark. According to folklore, the mark was dark skin. There's absolutely no biblical justification for this whatsoever, okay? I mean, it's just made up after the fact. And it was made up by Europeans once slavery started in order to just rationalize and sort of, in a twisted way, try to psychologically justify slavery. Oh, well, they're all descendants of Cain. Well, first of all, they can't be descendants of Cain. They have to be descendants of one of Noah's sons, because every descendant of Cain other than Noah's was wiped out because the flood did that. Okay, so anyway, they got to get their Bible stories straight. I don't know. They're messed up. But there was this tradition of saying, well, black people are the sons of Cain, okay, because they have the mark of Cain because they're darker than we Europeans, etc., which is weird stuff. But she says, even if you accept that, she says, remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Everybody can become a Christian. You don't have to be white to be a Christian. Anybody can be. And in fact, I guess she didn't know it at that time, but the vast majority of Christians on the planet today are not European descent at all, right? At all. There's a larger number of African Christians than there are European Christians right now. And so what she's saying is, remember, now be careful, because she says, oh, remember, we black folks can become Christians too. I think there's something more to that last line than that. I think there's something much more than that. That if you're an intelligent reader and you read that last line, you say, I shouldn't just remember that. I should be cautious how I behave and how I believe, because there is another world, there is another existence beyond this one where I'm going to be judged. and I'm going to be judged based on how I treat people, but I'm really going to be judged based on how I treat, in their minds, fellow believers. So she's just planting a little thought there, going, you might want to think about how you treat people who are different from you racially, and yet the same religion. Because let me tell you something, in the next life, there's going to be no difference. There's going to be no slave, no free, no rich, no poor. And how you treat people in this world is going to be reflected in how you're treated in the next one. I think there's a very subtle, she has to be subtle. So all three of these women use subtlety, okay, rhetorically. But they have very strong arguments that you have to be very intelligent and read between the lines to see. But I think they're clever. They're very well crafted. And they're also dealing with how do I come to terms with injustice in my life and yet still maintain my belief, my core values, my faith, in their case, in the Christian religion. Okay, so let's move on real quickly to what we're going to do on our quiz here. Here's our quiz. As with every quiz, this is very important. I need you to submit your quiz responses in an email sent only to that email. Why? Because I keep all of my emails going there from my classes, my online classes or hybrid classes, in that email account, because my TW email account will swallow it up and I'll never find it. Okay. I mean, I get thousands of emails a week in my TW email. This keeps it separate so I know where you guys' emails are. Okay. So always, always, always send your email about the class to that email, my private email. And I need you to answer these two questions, plus a bonus if you want to answer that one, by Monday at midnight. Number one, what possession did Mary Rowlandson acquire during her captivity that meant the most to her? Okay. Dum-dum. Should have heard carefully, should have listened carefully, and read carefully. 2, what skill did Rowlandson have that Native Americans desired and were willing even to pay for? I covered that as well. And bonus, how much ransom? How much ransom was paid by Rowlandson's husband? If you're attentive, you read, you listened, you'll know the answers to all three of those. Send that to me at alfredlitton@yahoo.com no later than midnight on Monday. Normally, we'll have a discussion, an online discussion, but for this week, we're not going to have that. We will in future weeks, okay? So read this. Send me your email quiz by Monday at midnight, that at email address only, and then we'll see you in class on Thursday. Thanks.